So I might supply my actually. And the feel of the rest of the years and
Well, that was one of the things. They were also bringing up Three Waters and how it was going to affect their small unit. Once again, I kept my mouth shut because I said I didn't know what was going to happen. I said nobody knows what's going to happen.
Their scheme at the moment is not affected by the Three Waters reforms because it's already happened.
The scheme's already happened.
Yeah, their responsibility under the Water Services Act has already happened because the water reforms now is what happens to the council schemes. It's already happened.
That's right. Right. Well, they were talking about what was going to happen to the whole lot of them, about costs and shit. I said, I don't really know.
Give me a ring for them.
Yeah. And they had a speaker there, Rebecca McGilvor. What's her name? Guildford. She opened that rail trail, the trust touring route in Maniototo that day.
Yeah, Rebecca McElroy.
And she spoke about the Terrace Airport, all the things. So she came down and spoke about that. Very interesting. What she was talking about how they did it originally, basically just went out and bought a bit of land and they didn't even tell the shareholders. Because it was such a small amount. They were how many $1 billion job. and they spent $45 million buying land. They didn't even tell the shareholders or ask them. The shareholders, so that's fine.
Isn't it? Yeah, location.
Yeah, it was quite interesting talking to her. She was talking about, what do you call them? Wide-body jets compared to the little jets. And she said a little jet into New Zealand will bring $100 million. And she said a wide-body jet will bring $500 million in a year.
Yeah.
And I thought, geez, that's why they want the airport there.
Whole thing. Yeah, it is, eh? Yeah.
And the only real issue she said they've got is the fog, about how they place the runway. It's the major issue with the fog.
Cameras and bells and whistles and strings on the
Yep.
planes, made that not a problem.
Oh, no, it's when they build it, if they build it, about where they position the runway, which either it goes, they go west with it or north, depending on the fog and the wind.
I think
Because they're only going to have one runway.
the jets have to actually be able to see the runway, whereas those, when they land, because I've been to Dunedin and back,
Oh, yeah.
in jets, and they
Yeah,
say
that's
if
true.
they can't see it, they
Yeah.
can't land on it, whereas when we finally went the fourth time, this all bloody propeller thing, and they just came around and just dived down real low and just bombed it down.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yeah.
So jets need to see it.
Yeah.
So that was quite interesting. The main topic was why aren't they building it at Wanaka, at Luggett? And they said it's something to do with the lease of the ground. They can't have a whatever year lease because they need 45 years or 50 years before they do it. But yeah, she was very interesting. Once again, I'm going to bring up the topic of bridges. There was a meeting I gathered the other day in council about some sort of strategy or
Couldn't you talk to that, eh?
Yep,
You've been named for the job.
I can. If you just give me a couple of minutes, I can bring up the
Oh, yep.
report and I can talk to what the resolution is.
we can do that at the end. I've been having a couple of meetings with a walking group in Ranfurly about making a walking track.
The rail trail and walking track.
Well, they don't like walking down the rail trail because there's too many bikes on it. And their proposal was to the old skating dam, right down behind where the motorbike kids run around in, was to fill that with water so they can walk around it
Why do you have to have water in it to walk around it?
because it would look nice.
It brings more bees. Heaps of people walk down around that Tyrone Street, around the
Yep.
back of there, and then back. It's like a continuing street.
Yep, there's a lot of people, they thought they could fill it with water, and so I discussed it with the guy from the regional council about getting a water right to put the water into it, because that's a creek that comes down there, it's a tributary of the East Yubin. And it's not that easy. So we've got to go back to, I think there's a report coming to us from council about a walking track, but there's a lot of work to do down there. There's an old fence, there's
Yeah,
rubbish
it's-
for miles. Mark would fix the fence probably,
It's
just,
a mess. I mean,
you know, so,
I think the rail trail is a pretty good walking track.
yeah, no, they weren't that keen on the rail trail.
Yeah, good. So I hear a lot of them like to walk up the road and down Ellison Lane.
yeah, there's a,
Well, that's dangerous enough too, isn't it? Because there's not much room on Ellison Lane.
what
No,
about
it's
the
on
ones
the road.
along
Put track
85?
down the side,
Heaps of them.
You'd have to make a bit of a
down the
track.
side, you run out of room when you went through the car and just pull the rail.
You could make ones around the block, because that bit behind the cemetery where those ratty pine trees are, people are driving cars through there now,
Hmm.
because there's no stops in them. And a lot of people walk through there. You could have one that goes along down, because people walk on that by your leasing paddocks quite wide, except where the golf course put their fence, and now you can't walk on the edge there because they've moved it out. But their fence, when they put their fence in along the golf course leasing paddock, it used to be the same width as the other bit.
Oh, it used to be on the other side of the trees, didn't it?
Yeah, used to ride their horses and
Yeah.
walk and ride do their dogs, and then they moved out, you can't walk on there anymore. But there is a bit, and also when you go along the main road, apart from where the culvert is, along 85, there's quite a big, about 1.5 culverts where you could actually have a thing
Coming down this way.
coming along there. So they go along there, down, and then round behind the cemetery. You could do it without having to involve that where they used to ride their motorbikes.
Well, it's a good place for kids to ride motorbikes. It's out
Where
of the
they
way.
don't ride it.
Oh.
So they ride on the plane.
Yeah, some of them do, but most of the ones that go down there are normally pretty good. The parents keep an eye on them. There is the odd one here. What's up to the main? It's right. Potholes around the town. Drive around with a person about potholes and slumping roads, particularly outside Chris Spratt's place. You've seen that one? It's getting quite bad. It actually fills up.
Yeah.
No, that's just one of the ones over here. No, it's over on.
And yet, I put a service request on that one about 2 months ago.
There's been numerous complaints about it. No, just out Chris Spratt's on Dungannon Street.
All right.
There was a dig out there, but
Yeah.
something's obviously lit. Something's getting way under there.
Yeah. Sometimes when it rains, it's almost like.
Well, it's full of water all the time now. It's sunk that much.
But also down Tyrone Street, the side of the seals all broken off down by the hospital end, and there's a big rut now.
Yep.
And it's just because people drive up the middle of that road, you've got to get off it.
Yep.
To get into that, you just about feel like your axles.
Yeah, well, that's just the edge brake that I don't know what the.
So what street was that?
Tyrone's the main with it. It's got a lot of edge brake problems, but there's
Down this end of it.
And
by the hospital.
big pothole?
Well, it's a big slump in the road on Dungannon Street, whatever Chris Spratt's bloody number is, whatever that is, somewhere there.
Around that.
It's just.
Yeah, but there's just a lot needs fixing. It's more as what time of year do they do them, and like I see they're out doing the sidewalk, the pavement on Stafford Street. Just thought it might have been a better investment to fix potholes and things around town rather than a pavement that doesn't get used that much really for people down there. They probably think it's a great thing. But there's quite a few, and it's more just having a time frame of when things get done and what time of year really. Some of them are getting quite bad, but it's the edge brake is the main thing around the whole district, whole central target. Yeah. I presume that's NZTA.
State highway it is.
On
No,
the highway it is,
on
but-
highway it is, but the rest of the Ida Valley Road, Racecourse Road up past it, that's quite bad. I mean, it's narrow. It's really narrow. It's getting worse too. Because years ago, the councils used to edge brake it with the graders, go up and grade the gravel and grade it back and roll it back in or lime it or whatever. But I don't notice it just doesn't get done anymore. I presume that's a cost.
Well, yeah.
Everything's a cost.
All the costs.
Can't be, but they don't want to bloody pay for it anymore. I suppose all the costs are going up. And I realise rates go up to pay for it. So, Mark and I had a meeting with the Pereira Trust that leased the school grounds and the old tennis court pavilion about handing it back, getting out of the lease as of the 1st of July. So Linda's looking at the agreement on how it's going to work, just what's going to happen. Because they can no longer afford to use it because the dairy farm, as far as I know, isn't going to keep using it and paying them for it, and the costs they're incurring are not worth the effort. So we'll end up with it back at some stage.
They'll get a chance to put it back up on the market. Is it ours or is it reserved?
It's reserved.
No, it's not ours. You have to get right through the process.
Janice?
Chair, thank you. So what will happen is a variation of this will come back to the community board because they want to hold on to the tennis pavilion site. And the reason they are putting it, I want to, when it was first released to them, it was the trust who had a real passion for doing the camping ground. Current trustees have no passion and haven't had a passion for a very long time. So it is it's good that it's coming back, and then we will have to do some work with the community about we've got this school building, the school site back again, and there'll have to be some consultation out within the community or what else could it be used for, and as a process going down the track.
Thank you, Janice. So that was the other day, Mark and I were here and we just listened to what they wanted to say, and there'll be a letter going out showing us what's going on.
We'll meet with the Patio Recreation Zoo Committee next week to talk about the proposal and just gauge what they think about it. And then I'll be drafting up a letter. I'll run it past the Patio Community Trust. It's just to say it's being handed back, really. It's nothing that consultation will be at a later stage for the schoolhouse, or not the schoolhouse, the school building, the next section that's come back to council. Because it will now sit under the Pettigrew Recreation Reserve Cost Centre. So that's why I'm meeting with that committee, just to inform them.
Thank you. I tried to have a Zoom meeting. Stu decided not to call in last night. The Zoom meeting for the Rail Trail Trust. Busy. Well, it didn't go very well. I think Amy Pont was the only one there, and I couldn't get on very well. But the outcome of it was basically put a sun feature out in front of the.
Well, I have seen that proposal.
Yeah, I saw the proposal, and that's what they're thinking. Instead of standing it up 14 metres in the air for someone to jump off, not that would happen in the Maniototo, of course. They're talking about putting something. I think it's 14. It was 14 metres.
Yeah,
14 metres flat on the ground. So.
and with a concrete back of it with the planets relative to where everything is in the sun.
Yeah,
So it's sort of got elevated parts. I've seen the proposal of Sam Underboard at a business meeting the other day. So, and that, to be fair, would be where I was going to line up the whole lot rather than the vertical structure. And that's concrete and just cut to steel, so it will rust into the concrete in the sense it'll be like a sundial itself, but it will be as where everything is. So it looks, from the option they had, it's well worth looking at. It'll be cost efficient.
How much are you talking?
I don't think a lot. I don't
They had a budget of 220,000 for the whole lot, didn't they? Was it
I haven't seen the budget. That's what I haven't seen.
That's for everything.
Sure, I was thinking you'd be looking at 15,000 in one.
I mean, that's all the planets and all the things right around the rail trail. I think it was 220,000
Oh, as a whole, yeah.
for everything.
Oh, they've already done all the plans.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the budget they started with.
Oh, right.
So,
I don't know what this cost ended up. Sam never showed it, but I have seen it, and then I got text from Cat Wilson last night when I couldn't get it.
right. So I never managed to get on because it wouldn't let me, but I was obviously doing something wrong. The Naseby Flying Fox was meant to be open on the 14th. I see I got an email saying they couldn't do it. I presume there'll be another date coming up for it, and they'll.
Well, I was going to go up, but the weather wasn't any good.
Yeah, well, they cancelled because of the weather.
today.
They couldn't. They didn't think they were safe to drive here, which is fair enough. But it'd be good if they email us to when it's on again, so we can go for a look, see what's happening. And the last thing I got before we get back to bridges is the spelling of the Maniototo, and I turned my phone off the day after the positively Maniototo paper came out
Yeah, I
because I
did too.
was sick of it.
And they were right once you explained it, wasn't it?
No, well, Yeah, I explained all that. It's nothing's going to happen unless you want to change it. Well,
Yeah, no, as it brings them out.
Can I speak to that now?
oh,
I'll tell you what actually, my mother got into me for a start. But the saddest part about it, probably, if you look on the lady from the chemist shop was at a business meeting the other day, and one of the editors or producers of Maniototo works in the chemist shop, and said the amount of abuse for the people off the street were coming in and abusing her behind the counter of a business about the spelling was terrible. And I'm sitting there going, you're foolish to think this community doesn't care, because it really does, and it will tell you. But I mean, and then I was at it. There was a Te Āki Maniototo women's group I'll talk about that at our place, and Jimmy Becker's wife, Lauren, and her and one of the other members of the Kapahaka group had fallen out because one doesn't want it to change and one does. And they've actually, girls taking Kapahaka together, and it's blowing them apart. And it's like, nah, yeah, had enough of you, had enough of you.
Yeah. So,
and it's been really topical. I've had it all along, and I'm sticking with it. It's only just in this office that it's that part done. And leave it there, but men are alive. And I'm not on social media for one good reason, and apparently it's been running pretty hot. Anyway, carry on.
oh, yeah, that's it. I've tried to explain to people that it is nothing. You don't have to. People think they have to change the name of their business now. They're all listening, going, no, you don't. And they said, what's it going to cost to change all the signposts around the town? Like Maniototo Station, and I said, well, I don't know if to change it. I don't think the council's going to.
Well, yeah, and the basis of that, the council can't, if the geographic did eventually, and it would take, I mean, we've been talking about Whakatipu for years now. If it eventually came to that, they can still spell it how they want. Or when the paint peels off that, they can, nobody's going to make anybody change their letterhead, the name of their business or anything else.
Yes.
As an elected member, it puts a lot of pressure, well, it doesn't put pressure on me, because I'm not saying I don't care, but you just go, well, it's just another thing that's coming out all the time.
Yep.
But the community doesn't take much to get them riled up at the moment.
At the moment, it doesn't. I think it's just the time of our lives where everything's going on. People are just jumping down your throat from just whatever.
Jumpy.
Yes. And that's me, apart from bridges.
Cool. So a report went to the 1st of June council meeting. There were several recommendations in the report, so I'm just going to read through that. I would, the report is available on council's website, so it can be found there to read through. And it's a very detailed report, but recommendation A was receiving the report and accepting the level of significance. B was that council note the extent of high priority bridge work required and the replacements of existing bridges which are either closed or at risk of closure will significantly exceed the budget available in the 2021 to 24 period. C, agrees to appointment of a dedicated project manager to manage all bridge investigation, customer liaison, physical works, work program development and strategy delivery. And just adding to that, we have appointed a project manager and they are working their way through this now. So that's one of the major projects team, civil engineer as part of that team. Recommendation D was approves the funding of the project management costs from the existing bridge structural renewals budget. Recommendation E was direct staff to investigate and report back at the July 2022 meeting on options and costs for a temporary Bailey Bridge to be installed at the location Maniototo Road's Tauru River Bridge 145, including opportunities for a cost share with the adjacent affected landowner. I've been in contact with that landowner and we're working through that. We've also had the costs of the installation of that bridge and the hireage of that bridge back, and that report's getting drafted for the 6th of July meeting. Recommendation F, direct staff to report back to council with a prioritised list of renewal work to be undertaken in the 2022-23 year from remaining budgets on the 9th of November 2022. Recommendation G, approves the engagement of a specialist bridge engineering expertise to complete the remaining inspections and prepare work methodologies for renewals, options for bridge replacements and supported cost estimates to be completed by February 2023. Recommendation H, approves the funding of the specialist bridge engineer from the remaining budget inspection budget and then from the bridge structural renewals budget. So that's just around where the funding is coming from. Recommendation I is approves the engagement of Fulton Hogan as the incumbent roading physical works contractor to provide early contractor involvement in the development of work methodologies and cost estimates with the specialist bridge engineer. J, direct staff to consider a range of options for replacement of bridges, including replacement with lower cost structures, different levels of service. K, direct staff to consider a range of options for funding future bridge capital work with associated rating implications. And L, agrees that no further bridge replacement be undertaken until a prioritised list of work with implications of deferral for each structure is available for council consideration in February 2023. So the essence of that is council agreed to understanding the problem, figuring out the cost of the problem, and then we come back to council with a recommendation following that and the scale of the problem. So yeah, it was a very thorough report that Julie prepared. So and it's got a lot of detail on the bridge inspections and the status of a number of bridges today in that report.
Quinton's driving this bus now,
Yeah.
and I think he'll be very good, but he'll have enormous amount of pressure from Tracy and I to make sure, because we talk about water across the region and infrastructure, this is infrastructure. And us as an elected group for the last 5-10 years and going forward, the next 5-10 years are just caught in the middle of that infrastructure washout really. So we've got it's a big ticket.
Yeah. I just sent you a photo. Well, you see that?
That doesn't look entirely.
That's the Ironburn Bridge below the dam, right? And we're putting the water line back in that washed out. You got that, Mark? I just sent it an email to you. So where the gravel used to be. Okay? And I'm sorry, but you don't need an engineer to walk up and say, we need to rock protect that.
That's a problem.
Okay? And I spoke to James McCullum and the previous engineer, which was Murray, was it Murray? Heslip, yeah, that's right. I said, why can't we build a concrete abutment along there, precast it, drop it down, bolt it to the bridge, to the piles, rock fill behind it, and let the gravel naturally fill back up. Because if that's the bridge that ought to be down, if you lose that bridge, you shut off the whole of the entire.
And that's a council bridge too. It's not state highway.
And it's not $1 million fix, it's a $50,000 fix. And this is my argument with Julie and everyone, and I've talked to Julie plainly about these things, and you can discuss it with Julie quite easily. She doesn't jump up and down and yell and scream. But it's like the road at Cherry Hur, the Hills Creek Road. Yeah. I mean, we spoke about it, about putting the culvert in, taking the bridge out and put the culvert in. I got all the information from the regional council about consents and that. You don't need a consent to do it because it's an existing structure. I mean, you could buy 2 big culverts, and the culverts are about $30,000, right? So it's not a huge cost. And then you could spend another $50,000 and put the culverts in, rock protect them, and you walk away for $100,000.
And to be fair, James is looking at doing a lot of that and did do a lot of the smaller culverts and bridges that way.
Yeah, but you don't, what I mean is you don't need to be an engineer to walk up there and go, I'm not being rude about engineers and that, but I can walk up and say, well, this is what you need to do, you need to fix it. And that's the main.
And I guess that's the part where the section of involving Fulton Hogan more openly in that debate, whether rightly or wrongly, but that's where hopefully that conversation, Fulton Hogan's conversation and
well, the thing is that
it gets that start.
The bridge at Rural Halls there on the
Downs Road,
they rock protected. The bridge has had it, it's shut to light traffic, and they spent how much money putting rocks around it. I was there with Dean Cameron, I said, well,
I think it's 13 years since it was asked to be done the first time, wasn't it?
Yep, something like that, but
years.
it's a waste of time spending $50,000 rock protecting that bridge because it's had it, they've got to jack it back up. And they went right up the Ida Valley, they went McNally Road, they went Nicholson Road, Rutherford Lane, and they rock protected round bridges that didn't need rock protection. I talked to the guy, he said, we're just doing what we're told. I said, that's fair enough. I'm not sure in your area, but the digger drivers there putting rocks around a bridge that it's got no wash.
That's probably the basic reason behind this is that piecemeal, right, we're just going to do this because we need to be doing something. It's the wrong way to go about it. We've got to figure out.
We've got budgets. I appreciate the budget.
We've got to figure out the whole problem and then work out which the priority for fixing the problems isn't going to be what one's buggered first or which is, it's going to be, I guess, the ones that are the most buggered, that have got the most traffic on it or whatever. That's what we've got to work out.
Yeah.
But until we know the size and scope of the problem, all we know now is we've got, what was it, 85 bridges that are coming to the end of their natural life. We've got a problem.
We've got a big problem.
Huge problem. And those solutions that you've got are what we're going to have to do, things like that. But we've got to get it in the right batting order because otherwise we're going to wind up doing what you say happened 13 years ago, the whole lot of rocks getting thrown at stuff that was in fiction. But it's going to take time, and meanwhile, people are getting grumpy, and I don't blame them. So it's a.
Well, the Hills Creek Road Bridge washed out on the 17th of July 2017.
Yeah.
Right, and nothing has been done. The locals filled it in themselves so they could drive across it.
And that's the frustration. It seems that the work in the past 4 or 5 years.
The truck and trailers drive across it now. They don't care anymore. They just drive across it.
Really?
Yep. They're sick of it because that's the main route for truck and trailers into Ryder Valley is down that road. They just don't care anymore.
Well, I guess that's a frustration.
There's very little wrong with that bridge.
Yeah.
It's just that it's had an appraisal, I presume, by an engineer or something, and they just went 33% of the 50, is it 58, 52 tonnes? No, not 52, 48 tonnes, I suppose. So you're bugging.
I mean, trust
Tractors
the frustration
these days
isn't just with you.
with the bail wagon on, can't go over that bridge.
Yeah.
And so, and it's just like we seem to be kicking the can up the street, and we're getting to the end of the street. And if there's a wall at the end of the street, you're going to kick the can on the wall. It's going to come back and hit us in the face.
Well, this is where we're at, and that's what have a read of that report because it is. We should have got there sooner to take that point, but we're here now. and we're going to do it. We're going to do it once. We're going to do it right. It's going to take time, and there'll be frustrations. There'll be massive. I understand that. We're just going to have to wear it until we get on top of where we're at.
The only thing that I'll say that I think we're going to be a good job is I think Quinton's going to be great at helping doing that. And I think having a dedicated staff member that has that focus, and the priority will be very easy to work out. There's about 11 or 16 bridges that are quite high priority. And we look at this one, it's going to have to be relatively high priority, but it's been in the loop for a while. The engineers have looked at it, people have looked at it, and Julie and James looked at it, and it's like that probably when you took 10 and fixed 5 of the high priority ones, you're probably going to take a lot of the problems away quite quickly. But I agree with what you're saying, that it's not hard to do that other structure, existing structures. And I know James did a lot in the Weir bridges, took the wooden bridges out, put a culvert in, and then whether it's under budget, over budget, Tracy and I said just spend as much of your budget right up to there as you can. Keep spending, because that's our job ultimately, is to, there's budget overruns here, there, and everywhere. But in this situation, the time is actually quite relevant. And in my conversations, even on the radio, you hear me every now and then, this work doesn't go within existing budgets in the future. It is going to have an impact, and people need to know that if you want to go ride a bike in Naseby, you probably cross 3 or 4 council bridges. Now, whether you come from Queenstown, Christchurch, or Invercargill, you're crossing our infrastructure, and we can't block water in some countries. We can't. I'm just not going to be a part of it. Not doing it, and it has to have a cost. And unfortunately, one decision that Tim's brother had is they got 65% of their bridging funding from Wakatahi because they were lower socio-economic group in South Otago than we did. So we got 49 to 51. We get 51. Now they got 65. Well, if we're looking at a $50 million investment over 10 years, 15% of that's a lot of money that would cost our ratepayer. So, I'm not going to say it's our staff or it's our community, but we're growing at a rate where you might say the development in Cromwell, Bannockburners looks like high middle class wealth, but it's actually affecting their cost to get money out of the government because maybe it's in those pockets.
We're still 5-6 of median average wage stuff, but for me, the next LTP, if I'm still there, my attitude is that there's no bright, shiny, sparkly things. We get the stuff done that we said we're going to do, and we get this stuff sorted. And we forget about building stadiums or whatever, the stuff that's nice to have, because this is real. Can't ignore this any longer. And if there are rates rises, it has to be to get this stuff sorted.
And what I'm getting at is it's not hard. Like if you have to get a Fulton Hogan guy around, go and take a photo of every bridge. I mean, you can run around the Maniototo in a day.
Yep, and that's exactly what we're doing. I think, as you alluded to, is the fact having a dedicated project manager for this, that their focus is to deliver this program by February, so it can go into the National Lane Transport Plan, into our submission to Wakatahi for funding. We need to understand the picture because there's 37 bridges, I believe, that still require specialist assessment. Do all 37 of those require high priority work?
No, probably not.
No, they don't.
I think they'll work itself out quite quickly.
Exactly.
Well, the thing is, there's a lot of talk about bridge out at Halls Ford. And was it 2 cars a day, 3 cars a day? And then, because you've got a guy jumping up and down, it seems to be a lot of emphasis out there.
Yeah, but there's also an effect on
that bridge was going to
that
bridge was going to get pulled out.
Yeah.
NZK were going to pull that bridge out when they did Coden's.
The only reason it's only 2 cars across, it's nothing any big as they ever go across. You put a decent bridge in there and that'll get a lot of traffic.
It will get a lot of traffic, but you've got to get someone to put a decent bridge in it.
Oh, and that's our job.
And that's part of what this will do, because it'll look at a range of options for replacement of bridges, which may be a lower cost structure or a different level of service or no bridge. And that's what this project has to do. And there's not necessarily going to be a massive level of service change.
No,
there's not going to be new shiny bridges everywhere necessarily.
And I don't expect new shiny bridges everywhere. I just would like to see something done every so often somewhere to fix things, because like I said, that bridge there, that bridge goes. Yeah, because I went out and I actually went out and looked at all the sports and what they've done with the bollards whatever they put up, and it's not going to stop anyone. People have been pushing them out of the way and driving, people driving around them, and it's not doing anything. James Patterson informed me he had a bridge coming, so.
And it's been tricky with staff dealing with James, because you don't quite often get the honest answer all the time from the start, in the sense of it's changing. Like it's whether you go into the structure there, is it plus or minus a crane side, is it all that stuff? So it's a complete picture's got to be looked at and priced up, not just piecemeal that this will work with that. It's not Yeah, so you just got to make sure that we get that information. That's the hard part about it. And then if we have got money available, and there's this money comes available in different things, and whether we can tap into it. And there's priorities and bridges, but across the district, it's going to be a 10 or 20 year thing that has to just get chugged away at.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get the squeaky can, because you've got museums, and you've got a strategy of museums, you'll have.
No,
No,
you
no,
start
no,
on
no.
that. Those are the bright shiny things I'm talking about.
Yeah,
You've got to
so-
get your infrastructure
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Before you start doing that.
And unfortunately or not, whether I've walked into a trace and I've walked into it the wrong time, but it's a good project to sink our teeth into and get into, and we will.
The right people at the right time. That's why I put you.
Right, and that's all I've got, so I'd like to move that report, please.
I'll see it.
So can I have everyone in favour?
Yeah.
Right, against? Carry, thank you. Members' reports. Sue?
So I've got hardly anything. Apart from the spelling of Maniototo, we sending them off. And even though you tell them that it's nothing great, they don't sort of, it just doesn't seem to sink in. So if no one's going to change it, it'll take years, even if the geographic board decided to, it'll be a long time. And you can either write it like that or however you like. So anyway, that was that. Then I had someone ask me a question about wheelie bins, which I couldn't answer, and I couldn't find anything on the website of the council. How long ago did we get wheelie bins? And is there a lifespan to the life of wheelie bin? Because as I was driving down the road, I saw a bottle bin that had two giant cracks down the side. And it was like, but whether they used to put too many bottles in there. And they said, how do you get a replacement? Do you have to wait until they're all in place? Do you have to pay for it? Do you have to take your old one and show it? And if it really small enough? And I thought, well, they must have a lifespan when you had the contract. And there must be a time when it's going to run out and you're going to supply us with more smaller ones. Or
This guy
something.
can give you all the answers.
Is
Right
he?
off the top,
Okay.
he's the wheelie bin man.
Is he?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
I'm the wheelie bin. No, so first off, it's a super simple process if there is a damage bin. It's just a phone call to council and raise a service request.
Yeah.
And all that the resident will be asked to do will be leave that bin out after the next collection and it would get replaced.
Oh, so
Um,
does it cost them anything?
Now, that's the question. So if damage has been caused by the user or the resident, then there is a charge to replace that bin. So melted with hot ashes or different things, or you've put something wrong in the bin. But if it's truck damage or worn out and split in different things, and that can be a combination of weather and weight and different things like that, there's no cost. So it is just a service request with
Okay.
council. Typical life of a bin. 10 years. I think the contract was for glass bins was 2014, I think off the top of my head, 2013, 2014, or 2012. So we are just working through the final parts of our waste services procurement and a new waste contract beginning 1 July 2023, and that will bring some significant changes for the community, and that contract will be signed and announced next week. So there will be a media release going out around that, and that does include some bin sizing changes as well in that.
Is there any
and-
incentive for people to do that? If you said to me, well, next year you can have a straight big bin or a half size bin, and it will be slightly cheaper on your rates.
Yes,
Because
yes, there
obviously-
there will be incentive, but it's incentive the other direction in terms of here is a smaller bin, a bigger bin is a larger cost. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's smaller standard and large is extra.
Yeah, and that
it
ties in.
just applies to the red or all of them? You wouldn't want to make the recycling ones smaller because then you.
Correct. So what went out for procurement was and this is all based on timelines of when different processing solutions can be established. So an organic bin will be provided in the contract as well, but that's dependent on the timing of a processing solution, and there'll be more on that coming out next week. And the red bin being smaller in line with that organics processing solution, because 44% of all content in the red bin is organic material, so that can move to that organics bin. But the blue bin will be retained at its current size and collected more frequently. And the recycling bin will be collected the same fortnightly, but it won't be dropped a week when the glass is collected. It'll be collected on its own, and the refuse bin will remain fortnightly, but there's more information will be coming out.
So it's everyone gets all of it whether they want them or not. Like, okay, that's good. Thank you very much. It clears all that up. Apart from that, I've just been communicating with Louise regarding the library, and that might come up later on. That's the correspondence. Apart from that, pretty quiet.
Thank you, Sue.
Pretty quiet too. You've had a lot of discussions with different people about different aspects of what's going on, but no one's actually rang me specifically. As we were saying before, the general sense of people are just starting to get a bit pissed off with things. I feel the next election could be quite interesting. Not our election, the general one.
It's just the time we're living at the moment. Everyone, it's just very frustrating for everyone. And some people forget that it's frustrating for everyone, not just themselves. Right, thank you, Mark. Stuart.
Well, I've actually been very busy. I don't know where to start. So I'll start with council business first. We sat on the speed submissions the other day. First time I've chaired a submission group. That was all right. It was great. Staff did a great job, and they had two fantastic helpers, and Councillor Elliott and Councillor Patterson. Yeah, it was a good process. The general rule was that people wanted everything slowed down, which was surprising to what most communities did. Naseby was the only one that wanted to stay the same, and a few of them, but you had Pies of Morning, a lot of trying to slow down there, and amazing St Bathans, Cambria. People have been living in the region for 3 or 4 years. It's most beautiful, and a kid could get run over, so it was actually trying to get St Bathans to 15 k's of it, what they wanted in some of these things. So there's a really broad range of issues. I think we've handled it pretty well. I thought the AA wrote a pretty good submissions on some of them, get fact information, but there's quite a lot of discussion. I left home at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I got home we walked out of the office about 5:15 or 5:30 or something. Wayne was picking up. So it went a wee bit longer, whether that was something suggested or cheered it okay, but I felt you get a 5-minute bell when you talk to it. Some of them went over, but I felt it's quite important that people did have their say, because you can shut people off, and they're pretty thorough, and you know, and especially around Clyde and around the Ernsdew areas there that have got a lot of people, a lot of kids and all that stuff. So people had their say. It went well, and big thanks to the staff and my 2 councillors, but hopefully we'll come up with pretty good solutions. And we listened. With the comment, we sort of took it on and tried to understand, because some of the bridges roads we haven't been over. Bridge discussion last council meeting. I felt there was a landslide change, just even the way the report was written by Julie. It was very thorough, and we are going to this, and having Quinton taking that role on, and having a permanent staff member there as well. When you start it, like you're going in, he's not going in just to erect the old drum that's leaking all the time. There's actually stuff in there that the combination of that, and Tracy and I keep the pressure on, and dealing with government. And I didn't have a meeting. I had formally caught up with Kelvin Davis and Dunedin at the pub before the rain flew out and I sat there and I talked about, I said, what are you guys down for? Just the same old conversation. I was down talking about our budget. And I go, well, what did you think of your budget? And he goes, what do you mean? What did you think of our budget? And I said, it was inflationary. And I still think it left rural New Zealand behind. And it was apparently the 13 of the Maori caucus that were in there. And one of us got into, and I said, we're still going to have infrastructure. I said, we can't get roads fixed in Central Otago. He said, what, for trails? And I went, no, for cars. And he goes, oh, that's interesting. And I said, well, we've got to be able to get a fire engine out. We've got to get an ambulance out. We've got to get to this. And it was quite interesting. I said, but we've also got to keep workers in Central Otago. And so with the tourism, I said, I'm a farmer of tourism and council. And he goes, oh, tourism will open up. Well, there's no point opening up the whole rate because we haven't got the staff to do the beds, put the feeds, to do all that sort of stuff. So infrastructure has to be there for us as well. But I said we also have to have infrastructure in rural New Zealand to keep staff, to keep young guys, to keep young girls, and keep schools open. So it was quite. I had 15 to 20 minutes with them, and it wasn't not listened to. Like, you know, they and I said it's no different whether they're cutting trees down the east coast, North Island. Infrastructure, we talk about trucks and costing, it has to be done. So that was interesting. Yeah, so did the speed limit, did that meeting. I felt come away, Tracy and I both came away feeling well. Actually, we had got some traction, and I think it's just too far down the road to avoid now. And especially it's a weird thing coming up to election time. I don't know if people are going to stand or whatever, but these things become really tricky round 2 or 3 meetings out from an election because people say, oh, they haven't done anything about bridges, they haven't done anything with that. So that was just a feeling there. Yeah, heaps of feedback about the Maniototo thing, and it doesn't worry me one little bit in the sense I just say, look, this is what's happening at council. If they don't listen, they're not listening. So this community's great for not listening until it's something they feel they've got to talk about. Went to the business breakfast the other day. It was a really small turnout, and things are just starting to roll over into the we're really quiet. The cafe's not got much happening, and you know, I don't know how it's looking, but the farmers still spending, but there's no one around. There's a feel a bit of that. And I had an ASB Bank conference thing, meet the clients yesterday up at our place at Bullshit, and they had the head of ASB Rural, and he had the All Black coach speak to a function they had with farmers the other day, and Steve, what's his name, Foster, said, I just want to thank agriculture for pulling New Zealand out of the trouble, because when the All Blacks go everywhere, New Zealand's seen as an All Black country and a farming country. And he just said that the rural's looking really, really strong. But he said towns, urban New Zealand is in a real mess. And he said you go down Main Street in Auckland and the cafes are just struggling. Small businesses other than rural are really, really struggling. So he was saying that, you know, your communities are lucky you've got the agriculture been strong. And when you sit in there in the paint and harbour going, oh, we've got all the gym and it's going really well, and you know the farmers are spending and that's that industry, we're probably pretty lucky. But it was interesting that they really felt New Zealand and Greater Auckland was struggling at that bank level, whether it's, but they said the lifted housing, and this guy had his brother bought a $2.5 million house, say 4 years ago, and sold it for $5 million this last year. So there's been a lot of money in that housing market, and now you start to see it all over, and people talk about unaffordability of housing, and we're not immune from that in Central Otago. And you know, I think something like 38% of the houses employed are renters or absentee landlords, so we've got a lot of that, and I know. In the Maniototo, there's a lot of people looking at getting out of their house, big house, going to smaller units and apartments or flats, or whatever. So we've done that both together. Talked about the bridges. The other day, it worries me because I try to look in this role wide about our community. And I'm not going to say our community's failing and fumbling, but Mum had to take Anne Cotton to town the other day with a fractured hip because they didn't have enough people to take the ambulance, and she wasn't that sick, you know, to be flown or whatever. And there's 4 old ladies fell over that day in the frost and Ranfurly, all had to go to the doctors because of damages. And I know Janice is on the Ember, and you know, a few of us do that sort of service, and Doug Helm gives millions of hours. A, we should be recommended for a NIDWIL, but B, we're short of volunteers for one of those emergency services. And it really worries me because when you see 4 old ladies, it could be 4 ambulance trips to Dunedin because we can't do things. And the hospital's in hands back then they aren't. But now the old people get really fragile in the winter, but how do they sell the house? Where do they move to a unit and all that? It's very hard time. So I guess my real softness of me saying that this volunteer thing, we've got to make sure we keep our volunteers really well looked after, because, you know, single crewing a lot of the ambulances now, aren't they? You know, and it's pretty tough on the volunteers are there. And I know it's getting it. I even know south on the fire brigade, you know, you're out doing a lot of things all the time, and it's changed, but we've got to try to get a drive to keep ambulance officers, or else we're going to have to look at permanent positions. I don't know how it happens, but I just feel for the people that, you know, one frosty day and a few things go wrong, and we haven't really got the support. And you can't expect 80-year-old ladies to take 80-year-old ladies to Dunedin to get their hips checked out on. No. We live in a better society than that, I think. Yeah, so I guess last week was volunteer support week or whatever it was. So got under all our volunteers. Went to, where was I? Had a fire brigade meeting the other day in Alexandria. I came back because Mike Dowling got patron of the Maniototo Rugby Club, and it was really, really cool to see Wakata, everyone's standing around a hellish of a cold day, and all the supporters, the rugby club supporters, being there for Mike. I mean, Mike's been an absolute leader of this community from day one, whether it be at school, been community board and council. He probably, I've never felt more sorry for him than sitting on the Hayes, Project Hayes wind farm submissions, where the power of the community went against all that. So Mike and I remember having, you guys might have been part of Sue, might have been, we had meetings at the lodge privately with Mike, so no one knew where he was, and formed a, so for him, he's been sick last year. He missed it because he was ill last year to be patron this year, and he had a grandson and a son playing the team. So it was really quite special to be able to get back in time to do that. And it was one of those good things about being a councillor. And Mike nominated me originally, and we were having lunch in a couple of weeks. So him and Barry Beacon nominated second me again. So it's cool to see that and see the whole family and everyone get around. And that's well, everyone's angry that. I guess we've got to remember that our sports clubs, the bowling clubs and rugby clubs and the pony clubs, are massively important. And, we can spend money doing a lot of the stuff, and some of it might be the shiny stuff, but those places are a good place for all the grandchildren, all the wee kids, and it was so cool to be sitting there on a Saturday afternoon. But what did, and I'm going back to what they said at the paint and hardware shop in the meeting, and what the bank said, we didn't break out the night, and Harry, you were there. There's not a lot of people go there now, There might be 15 or 20 people go to rugby after match. When we used to play rugby, the place would be full. Yeah, so it's tough, because it's not cheap, but it's also something else. But also there's other aspects of it. I just hope that our licensing and our places are affordable places to go. And I know we do a lot of work here, and Janice does a great job with the rugby club and with the stadium, and the facilities are there. But they're struggling to get players now from Maniototo. They merged with Ranford and Gimbu, and now we're struggling to get players at time off and work. So I just hope it's not a forerunner to all of a sudden their cafes not be able to keep staff and not be able to sustain. But other than that, it's been a fair bit of pressure, I tell you, with the bridges and the road and to come up to the election and Three Waters. But we've got a good group of people up there in council. We've got good young ones, we've got good staff, and I feel that staff get in the gun a fair bit of, and it's tough on them. And I know it was tough on James being on the council staff and being a part of road, and he was getting wound up out in the community. You might go out and get abused. And I'm used to it now. It's like water off a duck's back to me. And you got to pick your moments when you might talk to me or Robert or Sue or Dunk or Harry, because we're actually doing a lot for the community. And I think that's at times you feel like you're really down beaten because everyone's having a go at you. And everything they talk to you about is negative. No one actually turns around and says, "My God, my water tasted beautiful today. Had a beautiful drive, whatever." Yeah. But it is tough. But to all the staff, I know, and it's we just sort of. Tim, they got a bit of stick the other day with Russell Garbutt and that. That's stupid. Well, a lot of these things are happening now. Before it would have been, no, well, yeah, fair enough, that's your point of view or whatever. And it's just as everyone's feeling that tension and pressure. And no one tries to make a mistake. So that's pretty much me. But yeah.
Right. Thank you, Stu. Can I have someone move those reports, please?
Yeah.
So, seconder, Mark Harris. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Governance report. Think we've lost it.
Received, isn't it?
Aye.
Just has to be received.
Yeah, it just has to be received.
I'll move it received. I'll move it.
Seconder, please.
Yes.
Sue. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Date of the next meeting is, where is it? What's the date of the next meeting?
August.
4th of August. I've lost my page.
That'll be a last meeting, is it?
No, it's second to last.
Second
to last.
Fourth meeting.
Penultimate.
Correct, yes, penultimate.
That's in there, isn't it?
Stop it there.
There's nothing.
4th of August.
There's nothing.
Right. So now we need a resolution to exclude the public.
Yeah.
Stu.
Harry.
Harry. Carried. Stu. Mark Harris, sorry. Sorry, we're getting ahead of you.
Just give me a minute and I'll.
Yep.
Put something up.